Emily Ruth Hargrove was born on March 3, 1984, at 3:33 a.m. during a lightning storm that knocked out power to half of Black Hollow. The midwife who delivered her swore the infant opened her eyes the moment she entered the world and stared straight at the ceiling as if she recognized something already waiting there. From the beginning, Emily was off, not cruel, not slow, not autistic. The doctors checked everything, just off. She never cried as a baby. Instead, she hummed a low, tuneless note that made the dogs in the neighborhood whine and hide. When she learned to speak, her first full sentence, at 14 months, was not mama or dada. It was, "The house knows my whole name now." Her parents, Daniel and Margaret Hargrove, laughed it away as toddler imagination. They were young, ambitious, and had bought 47 Mara Lane for a steal in 1983 because the previous owner's an elderly couple had died within a week of each other with no explanation. The bank was desperate. Daniel was an architect who planned to restore the crumbling Victorian to its 1890s glory. Margaret taught 3rd grade and thought the big yard would be perfect for the children they intended to have. They only ever had Emily. By age 3, she had an imaginary family she spoke to constantly. Not one friend, dozens. She knew all their names, birthdays, favorite colors, and exactly how each of them had died inside the house. She recited these facts the way other children recited nursery rhymes. There's Clara who fell down the stairs in 1927. But really someone pushed her, and Mr. Lang who hanged himself in the attic in 1954, but he didn't tie the knot right, so it took a long time, and baby Thomas who got locked in the cold cellar in 1909 and scratched his fingers to bone trying to dig out. Margaret took her to 3 different child psychologists, all 3, independently, refused to see Emily a second time. One sent a bill with a handwritten note, "Do not bring that child back into my office, ever." At 4, Emily began sleepwalking. The Hargroves installed locks high on the doors, but every morning they found her in the same spot, sitting cross-legged in the exact center of the kitchen floor, staring up at the ceiling and whispering in languages no one in Black Hollow had spoken for 100 years. When they asked what she was saying, she always answered the same, "I am teaching the house how to spell new names so it doesn't get hungry." Daniel started drinking. Margaret started taking pills. They stopped inviting people over because guests complained that someone small kept touching the back of their necks when no one was there. Age 5, Emily began collecting treasures. She would vanish for hours and return with Polaroids. She could not possibly have taken pictures of people asleep in their beds, taken from the foot of the mattress. The sleepers were always neighbors. Sometimes the photos showed injuries that hadn't happened yet. 6 months after Emily proudly showed Mrs. Delaney next door a photo of herself with a broken neck, Mrs. Delaney fell down her own basement stairs and died instantly. The police came. Emily, 5 years old, was questioned for 45 minutes. She never blinked once. When they asked where she got the camera, she smiled and said, "The house lends it to me when I'm good." They found no camera. They found no fingerprints on the photos except the victim's own. That was the first time the Hargroves tried to leave Black Hollow. They put the house on the market in the spring of 1989 and rented an apartment 2 towns away. For 6 weeks, everything was almost normal. Emily played with actual children. She laughed at cartoons. She asked for a puppy. Then, one night in July, Margaret woke to find Emily standing at the foot of their bed in the apartment, dripping wet, barefoot, wearing the same purple nightgown she had fallen asleep in 70 miles away. Emily's lips were blue. In her hands she held the for sale sign from Marrow Lane, uprooted and covered in fresh dirt. Softly, Emily said, "It followed us. Mummy, it knows shortcuts." They moved back the next day. The house smelled like they had never left. By 1991, Emily was 8, small for her age, with long brown tangled hair that she refused to let anyone brush because the knots are doorways. She no longer pretended to have imaginary friends. Now she insisted they were real and that she was the only one keeping them quiet. She developed rituals. Every night at 9:09 p.m. she walked the perimeter of the house 3 times counterclockwise, trailing her fingertips along the walls and whispering every name the house had ever learned. If she missed a single night, the walls bled. Not much, just thin red tears that soaked into the plaster and dried black by morning. Daniel tried to stop her once. He grabbed her arm on the second lap and shouted that this madness was going to end. Emily looked up at him with those ancient black eyes and said, very gently, Daddy, you're hurting Clara. She's the one living in your left hand now. Daniel let go as if he'd been burned. 3 weeks later, he lost the ring and pinky fingers of that hand in a freak accident with his table saw. The doctors could not explain why the severed fingers were ice cold and already rigor stiff when the blades had been warm from use. Margaret tried to kill herself in the spring of 1992 with pills and gin in the master bathroom. Emily found her, dragged her unconscious mother down the stairs by herself, impossible for a child that small, and pumped her stomach with a turkey baster and salt water until Margaret vomited and lived. When Margaret woke in the hospital, Emily sat beside the bed holding her hand and rocking it. I can't let you leave yet, Mommy. The house hasn't finished learning you. If you die wrong, it keeps you longer. Margaret came home the next day. She never spoke again. Not one word for the remaining 6 months of her life. In the fall of 1992, Emily began carving names into the walls with a paring knife. Not randomly precise surgical letters 6 inches deep. She worked only at night, barefoot, humming. The names were always of living people in Black Hollow. Within days, those people began having accidents, a broken hip, a sudden aneurysm, a child wandering into traffic. The town finally noticed. Whispers became accusations. Someone spray-painted witch across the front porch. Someone else poisoned the Hargrove's dog and nailed its collar to the door. On October 29, 1992, Emily came home from school, the last day she ever attended, with a note from her teacher asking the parents to please come in for a conference about disturbing drawings. The drawings were of the teacher flayed open and smiling, with Emily's name carved across her ribcage. That night the Hargroves had their final family dinner. Photographs later recovered by police show them sitting at the kitchen table, Daniel pale and shaking, Margaret catatonic, Emily smiling wider than any child should be able to smile. On the table, spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread, and 3 glasses of milk. At 11:47 p.m. the screaming started. Neighbors heard it for miles. Layered, impossible voices, a man, a woman, and something that sounded like 100 children speaking at once. The screams rose and fell in perfect rhythm, like a chorus rehearsed for years. By the time police arrived at 12:09 a.m., the house was silent and dark. They found Daniel and Margaret in the foyer sitting back to back on the floor, throats opened ear to ear with the paring knife. Their blood had been arranged carefully, lovingly into Emily's full name spelled across the hardwood in looping cursive 6 feet wide. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, they found what was left of Emily. She was propped in the center of the 4-poster bed like a doll, arms spread, nightgown soaked crimson. Her chest had been opened in a perfect Y incision. Every organ was missing except her heart, which was still in place and still beating slowly, steadily, when the first officer reached her. It beat for 4 more minutes while they watched, long after any human heart should have stopped. Then it gave one final, deliberate thud, and Emily opened her eyes. She looked straight at the officer, Sergeant Rowland's older brother. As it happened, Anne spoke in a voice that was hers and not hers, layered with every name the house had ever swallowed. "Thank you for coming," she said. "The house was so hungry, but now it's full for a little while. 33 years, maybe more. Tell the next ones I'm sorry. Tell them I tried to keep the quiet ones fed so the loud ones would sleep. Tell them I'm still trying." Her heart stopped. Her eyes stayed open. When the coroner later examined the body, he found something no report ever explained. Inside Emily's mouth, written on the roof in her own blood with a child's careful printing, were the words, "It learned mine first, so I have to stay and teach it yours." They burned Emily's body the next day against her parents' wills. There were no wills. The ashes refused to cool for a week. Eventually they were sealed in a lead box and buried in unhallowed ground outside town limits. The house went quiet. For 33 years it waited, patient as stone, practicing the shape of new names on the air, until someone finally came along who slept soundly the first night. Someone whose name tasted fresh. Someone the house could start teaching all over again. Emily is still downstairs, you know. In the warm place beneath the warm place. She doesn't want to hurt you. She just doesn't have a choice anymore. None of them do.
Thanks for watching. If there is anything you would like to see, leave it in the comments. I'll see you next time. I can't wait.